Welcome back, chapter 8. Okay, so I'm going to try it reading this chapter with this mic on. Y'all let me know how it sounds. Chapter 8. Cheryl grabbed a cup of coffee and a section of the morning paper and sat in the breakfast nook across from her husband, Ronald. It was 6 a.m. and this had become her blessed morning routine. She and Ronald wore matching 100% cotton spa robes with thick shawl collars and cuff sleeves. Ronald had ordered them during a luxurious stay at the Fairmount Princess Hotel in Scottsdale. Most people had moved on to online paper, but Ronald insisted on going old school with an actual daily newspaper delivery. He started with the front section while Cheryl preferred reading the business section first. She didn't know why. She didn't know much about business, but something about the dynamic read to her like a great soap opera. Today, no matter how hard she tried to focus, there was zero comprehension. The words swam by in meaningless waves. Ronald, who normally offered a running commentary on whatever he was reading, an act she found endearing and annoying in equal measure, was quiet. He was, she knew, studying her. She had not slept well after her sister's call. He wanted to ask what was wrong, but he would not ask. One of Ronald's strengths was his wonderful sense of when to pry and when to let it be. "What time is your first patient?" he asked. 9 a.m. Cheryl's practice saw patients 3 days a week starting promptly at 9 a.m. The other 2 weekdays were saved for surgery. Cheryl was a transplant surgeon. She's a surgeon, y'all. It was without a doubt the most interesting field of medicine. She mostly worked on kidney and liver transplants, which was both high stakes and challenging, but her patients, unlike other surgeons, always needed a great deal of follow-up, often years worth, so she could see the results of her labor. In order to become a transplant surgeon, you start with general surgery, 6 years in her case at Boston General, plus 1 year of research, plus another 2 years of fellowship in transplant surgery. It had been staggeringly difficult, but after the disaster, after the tragedy and the fallout, the medical center, her education, her occupation, her calling, her patience had sustained her. Her work, and Ronald, of course. She met her husband's eye and smiled. He smiled back. She could see the corners etched on his handsome face. She gave her head the smallest of shakes as if to say all was fine. But it was not fine. Why was Rachel at Briggs Penitentiary? The answer was obvious, of course. She was visiting David. On one level, okay, fine, do your thing. David and Rachel had always been close. He'd been up there for nearly 5 years now. Maybe Rachel felt that was enough time. Maybe she felt she should reach out, that he deserved some level of it, if not support, sustenance. Maybe with all the professional and personal headache in Rachel's life over the past year, Rachel would find what? Comfort in visiting a man who had always believed in her in her dreams? No, it had to be something else. In the same way Cheryl loved being a surgeon, Rachel had loved her job as an investigator journalism. That's a clue. She had lost it in a snap, fair or not, and now she wasn't the same. Simple as that. What did she do? Her sister had been wounded. The experience had changed her and nothing for the better. Rachel used to be reliable. Now her judgment was something Cheryl constantly questioned. Are they putting doubts in our head? But why would she be at Briggs? Perhaps she saw David as an opportunity. David had not spoken to the press, not ever. He had never told his side of the story, as though there was one, or tried to elaborate on his own theory about what had happened that awful night. So maybe that was Rachel's game. Her sister was still an investigative journalist at heart, so maybe she went to visit David on the pretense of caring about him. She was good at being a sympathetic ear, at getting people to open up. Perhaps Rachel could get a story out of David, a huge headline making, true crime podcast type of story. And maybe, just maybe, Rachel could use that to regain her professional standing and get uncanceled. But would Rachel really do that? Would Cheryl's own sister dredge all this horror up again, rip apart Cheryl's sutures, to use a surgical analogy, just to get back in the game? Could Rachel be so cold? How are you feeling? Ronald asked. Great. He smiled at her. Is it corny or romantic to say my wife looks extra hot pregnant? Neither, she said. More like you're horny and trying to get some. Ronald faked a gasp and put a hand to his chest. More? More? She shook her head. Men. We are a predictable lot. She was pregnant, such an all-consuming marvel. And it had happened so easily this time. Ronald was watching her again, so she forced up a smile. They had redone the kitchen last year, knocking down a wall, expanding the space by 15 feet, adding a mudroom for when they had muddied little feet traspering through the backyard, putting in the floor-to-ceiling windows and topping it off with a 6-burner Viking stove and oversized Northland Master Series refrigerator and freezer. Ronald had designed the kitchen. He liked to cook. Maybe, Cheryl thought, it was simpler. Maybe Rachel had figured that it was finally time to reach out to her ex-brother-in-law. Cheryl could sympathize with that. Hadn't she wanted to stand by her then husband too? Hadn't Cheryl stayed by David's side even when the investigation began to circle back to him? The idea of David hurting Matthew was preposterous. At the time, she would have believed space aliens had been responsible for the brutal murder over her husband. But as the evidence mounted, doubt started burrowing its way under her skin and fester. The two of them hadn't been good for months. Their marriage a plan on nosedive, though Cheryl told herself they gained control of the aircraft in time and pulled out of the plunge. They had been together a long time, since their junior year at Revere High. Good times, bad times, they always stayed together. They have made it. But would they have? Maybe not this time. That's the thing with trust. Once David lost it in her, nothing was the same. And once she lost it in him, as the suspicion started to circle in, Cheryl tried to maintain a supportive facade, but David saw through it. He reacted by pushing her away. The strain of it became an unbearable weight. By the time the trial rolled around, by the time the courtroom surprises came to light, the marriage was over. In the end, David had murdered their son, and Cheryl was a big part of the reason. Ronald took too loud a slurp of his coffee, jarring her back into the sunlit breakfast nook. She looked up, startled. He put down the mug. I got an idea, he said. She plastered on the fake smile. I think you already made your idea pretty clear. How about tonight we go out to Albert's Cafe for dinner, just the two of us? I can't, she said. Oh? Didn't I tell you? I'm meeting Rachel. No, he said slowly. You didn't tell me. It's not a big deal. Is she okay? I think so, yes. She just asked me to come over. It's been a while since we've seen each other. It has, he agreed. So I thought I'd stop by after rounds. I hope that's all right with you. Of course it's all right with me, Ronald said with a little too much bravado. He found his newspaper, snapped it open, started reading it again. Have a nice time. Cheryl felt the anger start to boil up inside her. Why? Why the hell would Rachel do this to her? If her sister wanted to forgive David, fine and dandy, go for it. But why drag Cheryl in? Why now? when she was rebuilding and pregnant. Rachel had to know what a strain a call like that would be. Why would she do that? That was the question that really troubled Cheryl. Rachel was a good sister, the best. They were there for each other, always and forever. Good times and bad, all that. And even though Cheryl was the older sister by 2 years, Rachel had, until recently anyway, been the more prudent and overprotective of the two. She knew how hard Cheryl had worked just to get herself out of the bed after Matthew's murder. David, well, not to put too fine a point on it, but Cheryl had cut him from her life, from her thoughts. In order to move on, as far as she was concerned, David had never existed. But Matthew? Oh, that was another matter. She would never forget her beautiful little boy, never, no matter what, not for a second. That was what she realized. You don't move past something like that. You learn to live with it. No matter how much pain you are in, you don't fight that pain. You don't push it away. You embrace it and let it become a part of you. It's the only way. The only thing more painful than remembering Matthew was the idea she might actually forget him. A groan escaped her lips. She quickly smothered it with the heel of her palm. This wasn't the first time grief rarely attacks from the front. It prefers to sneak up on you when you least expect it. Ronald shifted in his seat, but he did not look up or ask. She was grateful for that. So again, the question rose up in her. What does Rachel want to tell me? Her sister was not one for melodrama, so whatever it was, it had to be important. Very important. Something concerning David, maybe. But most likely, something concerning Matthew. Okay, that's the end of chapter 8. Okay, so last chapter, I was wondering if Rachel and Cheryl were working together to frame David. This chapter made me change my mind. So I don't know if they're working together or not. But then it's sounding like, I don't know. I don't know if David actually did it, or did Cheryl do it? And I want to know Rachel's story, right? And I think it's going to catch me by surprise, because I don't know what it is. I don't know. Did she go crazy? Did she snap? Was she's the one responsible? But then Rachel wouldn't be covering for her family is sometimes stronger than child. I'ma just see y'all in the next chapter. Bye.